chasing Otto Bolden away well. So is Frank Fredericks. And here comes Michael Johnson. They're approaching the top of the straightaway. Michael Johnson reaching deep. He has the lead. But Fredericks is still there. And so is Otto Bolden. But Michael Johnson has dead aim on the finish. Michael Johnson running for the round. And into Olympic history. A new world record. He set a world record. He destroys his old record.
Hi, this is Michael Johnson. This is the Greg Bennett Show. Any questions?
Welcome to the Greg Bennett Show, presented by Any Question. I'm your host, Greg Bennett, and I've just finished a wonderful conversation with one of the greatest athletes of all time, Michael Johnson. MJ won the 200-400 double at the Atlanta Olympics, backed up by winning the 400 again in Sydney 4 years later. He won 4 gold medals at the Olympics in total, 8 world championship golds. And in this episode, he shares his journey into the sport of sprint running. He discusses some of his highs, some of his lows. He goes into detail how the golden spikes, I don't know if you remember, but in 96 he walked out on the track with golden spikes on, and it put even more pressure on himself to perform. But he talks about how he had so much pressure anyway that it didn't matter. That didn't even do anything to him. But honestly, the story behind the golden spikes is really fantastic. And this was just a wonderful conversation with somebody that truly was one of the greatest athletes we've ever seen, stayed on top of the sport for 10 years straight, over 10 years, 11 years, held the world number 1 position in the 200 and 400, had never got a silver or bronze. I didn't know that. It was always gold at every championship. So that in itself is quite fantastic, and I truly was just thrilled to have him sit and join me for a chat for an hour. It was absolutely fantastic. You can find Michael on the Any Question app too. He's already answered well over 100 questions, and all of his answers are just brilliant. He speaks so well. You can go from here, download the app. It's completely free. It's on iOS, Android. You can go to anyquestion.com and you can find Michael Johnson there and send him some follow-up questions. He's absolutely fantastic at getting back to you. He often mentions your name, which, I don't know, if you're a bit of a fan like I am, it's a bit of a thrill. But he's a brilliant person. He's involved in Any Question. He's been helping us build it out, and we truly appreciate him for that as well. But listen to this episode. It really is amazing, and I'm just truly grateful for his time. Quick little bit of housekeeping before I let you go. I just want to mention I really do appreciate all your feedback. I appreciate all the reviews on Apple. If you can keep those coming, that's wonderful. If you write me on Instagram, DM me, I do my very best to get back to all of you. So please just let me know any thoughts you have. I love to hear from you. I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. And remember, success comes to those who endure just one moment longer. All right. Today, I'm joined by one of the greatest sprinters of all time, one of the greatest Olympians and greatest athletes of all time. He won 4 Olympic gold medals, 8 World Championship gold medals in the span of his career. He formerly held the world and Olympic records in the 200 and a 400-meter indoor world record. He's the only male athlete in history to win the 200 and 400 meters at the same Olympics, a feat he accomplished at the 96 Olympics in Atlanta. He's also the only man to successfully defend his Olympic title in the 400, having done so at the Sydney Olympics in 2000. He accumulated 8 gold medals at the World Championships and is tied with Carl Lewis for the 4th most gold medals won by a runner. He was elected to the US Track and Field Hall of Fame in 2004, where his 200-meter performance at the 96 Olympics was named the greatest track and field moment of the last 25 years. He's been a part of the BBC's commentary team for every Olympics since Athens 2004. His content on the Any Question platform is as world-class as his performances on the track. You simply must go check it out. It's an enormous honour, privilege, and just an absolute thrill to have him join me today. So welcome, and thanks for joining me on the Greg Bennett Show, the man with the golden spikes, Michael Johnson. How are you, mate?
I'm good. Very good, Greg. Thanks. Good to be with you. Can you do that? Can you do that intro over? I was enjoying it. I was really enjoying it.
It's one of my things I enjoy doing on the show. Even though I'm sure you know all of that, and sometimes it is nice to hear that a little bit, and it really is quite a record, mate. And I mean every word I say when I say it really is such a thrill. I think I'm a couple of years younger than you, but really the 90s and the Olympics and everything else, and you, it's really, it's a bit of a highlight to be chatting with you. So I appreciate your time, mate.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
So where in the world are you at the moment?
I'm in California. I'm in LA. Just got back, actually. I was out of the country for a week and a little quick trip, and always good to come back home. So I'm right here in LA.
Perfect. I know it's in the morning there. Did you get a chance to get a workout in this morning? Are you doing, what is your fitness like these days?
It's, I try to get at least 4 days. Usually I get 5 days in a week. Combination of just gym work. I have a gym here at the house, so I just get out there, get some gym work, get some strength work, and a little mix of cardio. And then I live here in Malibu. We got a lot of hiking trails right here. I can kind of hike right out my yard and just hit the trails. So that's cool. So I get out and hike a couple of times a week. We got some amazing trails. So so a little bit of everything. But right now I'm working out mostly. It's in the afternoon. So it depends on kind of how I'm feeling. Sometimes it's when I don't really, I'm not motivated very much to work out. Then I get up and get it done, get it out of the way, and I get it done. So I get it done in the morning, so that that's a good way for me to make sure I get it done, so it's not hanging over me all day. Yeah. When I'm really motivated, right now I'm in a motivated, stage where it's like, I look forward to at the end of the day, just spending some time in the office and on calls and things, and I can go out to the gym, or go out for a hike in the afternoon, to sort of just, break it up, and that's my reward. So I'm in that stage right now. Yeah.
When you were an athlete, were you more productive in the morning or the afternoon? When is your most productive time for you?
It's the same. It was, when I was an athlete, obviously, workout is the priority. That's the job. Yeah. So, for me, there's that the whole idea that, it's called the illusion of choice. That's the biggest problem for an athlete is the illusion of choice. At that point for me, I was like, there is no choice. This has to get done. So I'm going to get it done at the best time to get it done. Right. So I was always, we always split up the strength training sessions and the track training sessions so that there's a good break. So I was typically doing my strength training sessions in the morning and my track training sessions in the afternoon. But depending on, where I am, what I'm doing, and what's going on, if I knew that I'm going to have a better session given whatever the circumstance is, if I get on the track in the morning, then I'm going to get on the track in the morning.
Was that always affected, by depending on if you were getting ready for the European, Golden League or now Diamond League or whatever, and evening events versus maybe Olympic Games where they have trials in the morning? Did you try and work that sort of training method into what you were doing?
I never really duplicated, we never really focused on or centered the training based on when I'm going to compete or what time of day I'm going to compete, because I never saw, training was never a simulation of competition for me. So training was, and the time of training was always based on, I want to get the best training session I possibly can. So the decisions with regard to when to train, what time of day to train, and all of those sorts of things are based on what's going to allow me to have the best training session.
It makes sense. I found personally there was a few times when I'd have to race in Madrid or something, and I was coming from the West Coast in the US, if I flew in too late and it ended up being a morning race there, and it'd be equivalent of racing 2 a.m. in Colorado time, I'd be like, So it was more about getting in there early enough, I guess. But mate, I've really enjoyed watching all your answers and hearing, all your experiences and just listening to your stories on any question. And, so when I was sort of dissecting all of those, and I just thought it'd be just so fantastic to have you on the show and have a bit more of a conversation. So I do appreciate you coming on. What I'd like to do is basically, I'll start by, asking you to just rewind the clock and tell us a bit about your journey and then discussing some of your highs and lows and then even would love to move forward into your life and, the transition from being a professional athlete and where you see track and field today. So there's a bit to cover. Let's dive in. Let's rewind this clock and recap your journey. And when did you find your passion for sprinting? Where were you? How old? And what was your childhood like?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think that most people sort of have a preconceived, idea of how every world-class athlete, regardless of their sport, sort of what that journey is like and how they end up there. And by and large, it's fairly consistent, I guess. Kids end up playing sports as a kid. You sort of fall in love with the sport, as a kid, and you have this dream of becoming a professional. And certainly here in the States, and with sports like track and field or football or basketball or baseball, and swimming as well, you get to that next level by getting a scholarship to college. So now you're at the next level, you get a higher level of coaching. Then you get to the next level if you're so lucky to become a professional or Olympian. My journey was somewhat similar, but the early part of it was a little bit different. When I was growing up in the 70s in Dallas, Texas, inner city, a bunch of kids outside, just playing sports all day long, every day in the summers when school was out. When school was in, we were playing sports after school, at the park, at the school, on the schoolyard, just always playing sport. It was always fun. There were no video games. Mm-hmm. There was one TV in the house, and the parents were usually watching something on the 3 channels that existed at that time, that we didn't want to see. So we were always outside playing, so there was no video games or television as a distraction. We were just outside playing sports. And I always just loved sports. So, in school, we had sport in school. In addition to PE, we had organized sports in school and primary school, and played basketball, played baseball, soccer, football, exposed to all of the sports and loved it. And then when I moved to middle school, it was much more sort of a little bit higher level than it was for me growing up in Texas. American football was just unavoidable. So I played football. Didn't like it. I was good at it, but I didn't like it. I just played because all my friends played. And then that was in the fall, and in the spring I ran track and loved track. And then when I got to high school, just track. I stopped playing football, just ran track. But during that whole entire time until I was 16 years old, when I was 2 years into my 4 years of high school, at that point, it was always just fun to me. I was never thinking I'm going to go on to become an Olympic athlete or a professional athlete. That wasn't a dream of mine. And no one was pushing me or, identifying me as this kid with all this talent that we have to nurture. Because, obviously, I don't know how many of your listeners are American, but here in America, that's not that we don't do that. We don't have to, because there's so much talent and there's so much organized sports that the cream will rise to the top. Whereas, my role with Michael Johnson Performance, where we consult different Olympic organizations and sports teams around the world, they don't have that luxury. So you have to identify that talent early. So a lot of people will think, well, who encouraged you and who found you? Who discovered you? Nobody discovered me. I was just kind of doing my thing, having fun, And of course, also, there was no one from my neighborhood, where I grew up that ever went on to become a professional athlete or anything. So I didn't even know that sort of thing was possible. So it was a bit of an advantage that I was just able to develop on my own, just having fun and really for the pure joy of sport, as opposed to, it being a means to an end or a conduit to something. But when I was 16, just before my final year of high school, I was running really fast and started to realize then that, this is an opportunity, because colleges, universities started to contact me and my coach and saying, hey, we'd like to talk about, maybe, having Michael compete for us and giving him a scholarship. And so even at that point, it was just an opportunity for me to go to a much better university than I would have been able to go to had it just been, me, my parents trying to pay for it. So that was very attractive to me. But then shortly after that, I started to recognize that, I'm going to actually also get to compete at the next level, which is the collegiate level. And of course, once I got there, it was the first time that I ever really trained at a world-class level with really good training and support. And I immediately just took off and improved dramatically in my times and started running world-class times, and struggled for 4 years through university and college, showing a lot of potential in running fast times, but consistently having injuries. And then I finally figured out the injury thing, and the problem was me not doing what I was supposed to do. I loved running, but I didn't like strength training or stretching, so I didn't do it. I just wanted to get on the track and just run.
Oh, it sounds familiar.
But once I committed to doing all of the things that I needed to do, then started my professional career and was immediately ranked number 1 in the world.
Wow.
And the rest is, sort of history.
That's amazing. Have you got siblings or were your family, were your parents ever involved were they athletes themselves?
my parents grew up in rural Texas in the 40s and 50s. You know, I mean, 30s, 40s. I mean, my dad was parents were born in the 30s. You know, Black people didn't have a lot of those opportunities. You know, to be trying to, you know, I want to play sports. You know, you're literally growing up on a farm trying to, you know, just get an education and, you know, avoid getting, you know, killed and, you know, and just trying to survive. And that's what my parents were doing. And then when we came along, I have 3 sisters and a brother, 5 of us. I'm the youngest, you know, and my parents moved to Dallas after they got married, and that's where they raised us. And they were just trying to raise us to just, you know, get out of, you know, bad neighborhood and trying to help us to just, you know, be able to have a good life. So, you know, that's the reality of, you know, a Black kid and a Black family growing up in America, as opposed to, you know, sort of the idea that, you know, everybody plays sports and has these dreams. You know, that was not my reality. It certainly wasn't my parents' reality. But when it did become my dream, it was amazing, and I was able to make it come true. And of course, my parents were thrilled that, you know, never in their wildest dreams would they have imagined that they would have had, you know, 4 kids, you know, all, you know, thriving, you know, working, you know, great jobs and raising families and doing really well, and then one who, as my dad used to always say, doesn't actually have a job, but does really, really well. You know, does really, really well, just running around and traveling the world and running, and does really well with it.
Oh, I love that. And look, you and I both got to have athletic careers. There's some truth to that, right? I mean, it's we got to do the thing that as kids we were playing, and then somebody started paying us to do it. Right? I mean, it really is an amazing career. And don't get me wrong, you got to work incredibly hard, and it's you learn a lot of life lessons through sport. It's a great avenue to learn a lot from. But yes, it was a gift. Was there one race when a moment? You said it was around 16 when scholarships came and started. University started sort of talking to you. But was there one event or anything where it really clicked to you that perhaps there was something special that you really recognized you had strengths and talent?
Yeah, I think, you know, certainly when I started, you know, running against some of the really fast kids in Dallas, and I knew, I mean, we knew at our school, at my high school. My high school was a unique school that was branded as, you know, this school is for the smart kids. And yeah, somehow I got in, so I'm not sure how true that is. But you did have to apply. It was a magnet school, so it wasn't my school in my neighborhood. It was I could have gone. All my siblings went to the school in our neighborhood that, you know, is your school in your district. But mine was, you had to apply to this school, and only so many kids got in, and it was on the complete other side of town. But I did get in, and it was kids from all over Dallas in this school. It was a little bit more academically rigorous than normal schools. And they had, you know, different fields of study, almost like going to college, you know, where it was almost like having a major. So it was a unique experience, but we weren't very good at sports. In fact, we were horrible at sports. And, you know, and certainly, you know, kind of in the inner city, you know, that kind of tends to be the case. The kids that are, you know, focused on the books and, you know, and all of that are not as focused on sports. So the sports aren't as good. So we were not very good at sports, but we were in a district with some of the best kids in the country for football, basketball, and track. And I was running against those kids, and I was holding my own, knowing that our coach, who was, you know, one of my favorite people in the world, he's gone now, but my high school coach was not a great track coach by any stretch. He was a horrible track coach. And in fact, it was only because of him that colleges actually discovered me, because my high school coach wrote all of these letters to all of these college coaches saying, I don't know what I'm doing. This has nothing to do with me. Wow. So you should pay attention to this kid because he's doing it in spite of me. You know, and that's the only reason why, you know, colleges started to recognize who I was and how I got on their radar. But we all knew that, you know, we're not very good. You know, we're not getting good coaching. We don't even have a track at our school. And I'm running with these kids, some of who were the best in the world. So, I knew then that I had something. Where it would take me, that would come later when I started to realize, when I started to get contacted by these universities and start getting scholarship offers. But even then, I was like, okay, I'm going to go and have the privilege of competing at the next level. But am I going to go on and become a professional and an Olympian? I didn't know anything about that.
Of course, yeah.
But once I got to university, I got to Baylor University, and immediately in one of my first races, I came second and almost beat the athlete at the time who was ranked number one in the world in my event, the 200 meters. And I knew then that was not my best race. That was not the greatest race I could run. And if I had run better, I could beat him, and he's number one.
Wow.
So that's when I knew, I could be the best. At that point, I was convinced. This is when I was 19 years old at that time, and I was like, or 18, and I knew then I can be the best in the world. Now it was clear to me.
Yeah. There's something about that when it's other people can tell you, but when it actually becomes your truth, right? It's like there's something very special and unique about that, and very empowering. Your technique, you were fairly upright running technique and very steady in the upper body, like nothing moved. But was that ever like that? That was natural, right? That wasn't a coach hadn't taught you to run that way. It was a natural kind of technique that actually was very powerful. Obviously, you set world records and demolished world records. Was that ever something that coaches or others tried to sort of take away from you or change?
Yeah, so yes, it was the way that I've always run. It's the way that I naturally run. And when I was being recruited, all of the coaches recruiting me to college told me that I would need to change my style. And except for my coach, Clyde Hart at Baylor, who was, and that's where I chose to go. He never mentioned my style, but it wasn't that I chose to go there because he didn't mention it. I was willing to do whatever at that point. I wanted it, so I was willing to do it. I was assumed that, these coaches are saying that's what needs to happen, and that's what I'm going to do. And my coach just never mentioned it. And when I got there, he never mentioned it. He certainly changed things, but he never told me to change that particular thing that I run upright. And during the 4 years that I was at Baylor, it just never got mentioned. And then once I left Baylor and became a professional, then my coach, Clyde Hart, was still my coach, and he was my coach for my entire professional career as well.
Wow.
Once I left and started threatening world records in my first year as a professional right out of college, people started saying, he's got to change his style and he could break world records. And my coach then had the answer for it. And he said, look, all of these people are saying that Michael needs to change his style, but I don't see anything, and I've never seen anything that he's doing that's inefficient. Yeah, he looks different than everybody else, but he's also in front of everybody else. So unless you can tell me how it is.
He's in front of everybody. Why would you change it if you're in front?
Right, exactly. And that's always been a problem with coaching. I'm sure you guys have encountered it in swimming as well, where, there's sort of this just assumption without any analysis that, if this looks different than what we're used to seeing, then it must be bad, and we need to change it to what we're used to seeing. My coach was, a brilliant coach, one of the best ever, and he just felt like, look, he understood that changing an athlete's natural running style is very difficult, and there's only one good reason to do it, and that is if it's inefficient. If it's not inefficient, and it's not really negatively affecting the way the athlete competes, runs, then there's no reason to change it. And that was what he believed. And he stated that at the time, but then he said something else that caught my eye when I saw him doing the interview. And he said, in fact, he said, I don't know this for sure because we haven't actually had any studies done, but I'm planning to. And he said, I think it actually may be helping him. And this was at the beginning of my career. And as soon as he finished that interview and we talked about it, I said, what do you think? What do you mean? And he explained it to me. And I said, well, let's get on that, get in the lab and see. And as soon as we did discover that off season that, I'm able to produce way more force into the ground because of my upright style. And force into the ground as a sprinter is equals speed. So we knew then. So what we started to do after that was then started to incorporate things into the training that actually even enhanced what was already natural.
You're about the average height for a sprinter, right? 6'1", but your torso is a bit longer than your leg speed, your actual cadence. That always seemed to be higher than obviously you're running faster, so I'm coming. But even if you did tend to have a slightly shorter stride, would you say, than say who am I talking about? Frankie Fredericks. I remember watching you guys always
So
head-to-head in the 90s.
I think Frankie probably, so two things. One, well, just going to I think Frankie's a good comparison because we were always running against each other, and Frankie obviously was amazing as well. Frankie had, I think, a long stride for most 200-meter sprinters, and he's one of the best in the world at 200 meters. And my stride, though, was right in the average. So most people thought, well, he has a shorter stride, and I got labeled with that as he has a short stride. But everyone who said he has a short stride was a commentator. They weren't a sports scientist. Any sports scientist is going to actually verify and measure exactly before they actually make a statement. But I mean, it wasn't a slight, So I didn't take offense to it, but it was just wrong because the data showed that my stride is just right there, average with everyone else. But again, I think. And I'm almost sure that Frankie has a very long stride for the average 200-meter sprint, and probably lies a little bit outside of the average. But no, it was just normal, right there, average. But again, I'm able to produce so much more force into the ground, and because I'm upright and I have a very tight trail leg. So that was one of the things that you would notice with Frankie is that when he's with his stride, the trail leg goes way back.
That's what you have. It really pops straight up under your butt, doesn't it? It's like, boom. Yeah, I get it.
So,
yeah.
And a small, so if you imagine those strides, mine versus his as a gear, a small gear is always going to turn faster.
That's
so the stride isn't shorter. It's the recovery leg that's coming in close to the butt so you can get it back down quicker.
Yeah, okay.
And that has to do, and that's another advantage of being more upright. The more forward lean you have, the further back that trail leg is going to come.
I love the biomechanics.
The more upright you are, the closer in it's going to be.
I love that. I love the biomechanics there and studying the science of it all. Did you ever, I know you did the 200 and then you end up stretching it up to the 400, which would you say the 400 became even more so? I don't know. This is probably not the incorrect statement that somebody who's got the world records, had the world records in the 2 and the 400. But, did you feel like you were more of a 400 athlete or a 200 athlete by the end of your career?
So, obviously, at the beginning of my career, just based on the races that my race schedule was dominated mostly by 200s at the beginning of my career in the first 6 years. I would only run enough 400 meters just to pick off the best in the world and make sure that I'm ranked number one in the world, and I would, or I would just run it at the world championships, and a few other races and run fast. Times were way faster than everyone else's, so I would be ranked number one, but I was chasing the world record in the 200, so I was running far more 200 meter races than 400s. Once I broke the world record in the 200 in 96, then I turned my focus to breaking the world record in the 400. And then for the last part of my career, and then my injuries came back. I started to deal with injuries as I got older as well. So I was running fewer 200s, more 400s for two reasons. One, to stay healthy. And then the other reason to break the world record, which I was ultimately finally able to do.
Yeah, that was a long world record. That was Butch Reynolds, who you were in the 4x400 with. I think Butch Reynolds, at the end of his career, was kind of the start of your career. Yeah. And so that world record stood for quite a while, right? You got that in 99, I think, was it?
I broke it in 99. He had broken it in 88.
That's right.
But our careers pretty much coincided. But yeah, back to that original question, though, too, in terms of one of the things that and the evidence shows that I was at my best when I was running both races a lot, not a lot, but equally. When I was a 200 meter and almost predominantly a 200 meter runner, my 400 meters wasn't as good. And when I was at the end of my career, when I was predominantly running the 400 meters, my 200 meters wasn't as good. But in the middle, when I was running both of them, 95, 96, running both of them and just attacking both equally, that's when I was at my best.
It's interesting because you more often than not see the 100-200 double, right? The Usain Bolt and Frankie Fredericks, as we mentioned, and it's not often we get a 200-400 double. What am I missing? Who? That's kind of the way it is, isn't it?
It's always, so tradition will always inform, the schedules and that sort of thing. So, prior to when I started doing it, no male athlete had really ever competed in the 200 and 400 to that level. The traditional double is the 100, 200. You had a very unique 400, 800 double by Alberto Wantarena from Cuba back in 76. They had also a really good female athlete, Anna Quiro, who was another Cuban athlete, female, who was a 400, 800. But the 100, 200 was the traditional double. And then I was the first male athlete to really do it and do it at that level. But everybody would say that I was the first. But the first was actually Valerie Briscoe, who won the gold medal at the Olympics in 1984 in Los Angeles in the 400, 200, and 400. So, and she was always a hero of mine. When I was, coming up, she was a bit before me. But when I was in college, I was a 200-meter runner, and I always knew that I could run the 400, but it was really difficult in college to double up and run both. You had to really commit to one. So when I got out of college and was free to double up, immediately I finished that year ranked number one in both of them, and that was the first time any male athlete, there'd never been an athlete, male or female, who had ever been ranked number one in the World Book of the event. So yeah, it was pretty rare, and still is. After me, there have been athletes who have tried it and who have, been more likely as a 200-meter sprinter to try the 400 as well, or a 400-meter runner to try the 200 as well. Whereas traditionally, you're either 1, 2, and if you're a 400-meter sprinter, you're just 4.
Well, that's the thing. Like when you look at the 4, it's obviously not an aerobic event. It's still heavily anaerobic. It's under that sort of 45 seconds. But still, there's still that strength endurance component to it, that to hold a sprint, I mean, you're holding a sprint at 200, 19 seconds to hold flat out that's a long time already, right? I don't know, mate, I'm a 2-hour racer, I'm a triathlete, I go for hours. But the idea, I was, from school days, you'd run the 200 and the 400 was murder. It was like this. It was like if a 200 is a long sprint, what do you call the 400?
A longer sprint.
No, it's just like, I think I listened to your coach, Clyde Hart explain it, that you did break it up into 4s, the 4 Ps or whatever, the push first 100, then pace the second 100 and position the third 100 and then pray the fourth 100. I mean, is it that simple?
What people don't understand about the 400 meters is, just because it's a sprint does not mean, even for 200 meters, for a lot of people, just because you're sprinting doesn't mean that you're going all out the whole way. There's still a strategy. So no one can sprint the 400 meters all out. No one. I mean, it's too far. So you've got to, at certain points, and so you have a race strategy that you develop based on where you're going to be putting out more exertion, running faster, where you're going to be able to take a bit of a break, relax just a bit, and where you're going to actually then be pushing again at different points in the race, because you just can't do it all out. The 200 meters, I could do it, but it's rare the person that can actually, even most because again, most of those 200-meter sprinters are coming up from the 100, so they don't have that sort of speed endurance where they can hold that speed that long. So many of them even will have to do the same thing in a 200, where there's certain points of the race, it's probably just a slight, 1 second, for them, and that's enough where they got to back off just a bit. Because you just can't, otherwise you're going to run out, of gas basically before the end of the race. Yeah. Whereas I could do it, because of my 400 meter base, I could actually run the race from start to finish. But the 400 meters, it's a very difficult sprint because it's a long sprint, but that doesn't mean that you're sprinting the whole way. And it was never that tough for me, which might sound strange being that my base is a 200-meter runner and I moved up to the 400. Training, yes. I mean, most of my training partners were 400-meter runners, and I was never the first in training. When we were doing 400-meter over and doing 600, they were always winning. When we were doing, repeat 300s or, 2 times 450, something like that, that's a little bit closer down to my level. Then, I'm winning in practice. But when we were doing 600s, that's not my thing. I can't do it. Yeah. So training was always hard for me. So race day was easy. Wow. Training was tough. I wanted training to be tough. It wasn't miserable tough. It was a good difficult, because I knew that that's what I needed to do. And it became like an adrenaline, because I know that, the tougher this is and I get through it and I come through with some really fast times, that's going to bode well for me on race day. But race day was never hard for me.
Yeah. It's kind of like sprinting and running. I mean, they're all running, but you know what I mean? Like there's running a 5K or 1,500 is running, and sprinting is almost a completely different ingredient. It's a completely different thing. It's like,
it's a whole different sport.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I'm saying.
That's one that I'm sure you'll get to it at some point. And I know you probably want to talk about it, but that's the problem. That's one of the biggest problems with our sport is that it's so many different sports wrapped up in one. And and that was fine, at its inception through the maybe 60s and 70s of this current century. But today, if you were going to go out and create a sport from scratch, you wouldn't create a sport that has 3 different or 4 different types of sports in one. You got sprinters, you got jumpers, you got runners, you got throwers, and all of those are different things. I mean, I'm even at my height as a world-class sprinter, I couldn't throw. I could jump, but I couldn't throw, and I couldn't, and I couldn't. I mean, one of the funniest things was right after my retirement, I had moved, and my new neighbor next door to me, when I first met him, he realized who I was, and I was just at that point, I had retired, so I was like, I'm gonna maybe take up, getting out and going for a jog every now and then, something that obviously I had never done. Yeah. So, and he was a big runner, just a tech exec guy, and he's a big runner, and so he invited me to go for a run one day, and I couldn't keep up, and that was just the most shocking thing that he ever. And I told him he was gonna go out for like a 5-mile run or something. I'm like, man, I've never run more than a mile in my life. He couldn't believe it. I mean, if you're a swimmer, you're a swimmer.
Yeah, exactly.
And you guys, your diving isn't even in y'all sport.
No. Well, I'm a triathlete, mate. I swim, bike, and run. But honestly, I don't know if you found it, but I had the same kind of stories, even retiring from being a professional triathlete. Because I was a professional athlete, everybody then expects you to be able to do any other sport well. I was like, no, I honed in my skills.
Or they expect you to be able to do all 3 of them exceptionally well.
Yeah, don't ask me to sprint. Don't ask me to play touch football and try and catch you. I'm not going to be able to do that. I have zero ability to sprint, so it's completely
And that's why it's not in your sport.
Exactly.
That's why it's not part of, but in my sport, we got things in my sport that I can't even do halfway decent.
No.
And it's in my sport. So so that's definitely one of the problems. But to your original point, running and sprinting are 2 completely different things.
Yeah. Before we get to talking about track and field a little bit more, I just want to tell me a couple of, it's on paper, what are some of the greatest moments in your career, but for you now, if you look back, what were a couple of the really greatest highs? And they might be the win, or they might be just simply because you came back from injury and surprised yourself. But what stands out to you when you look back at it?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are obviously moments that, through having nothing to do with me. I wasn't the person that, brought the Olympics to Atlanta, but I was able to compete in an Olympics in Atlanta, and that was an amazing moment for me. Anytime I got a chance to represent the U.S., and I was fortunate to be able to go to 3 different Olympics, and certainly the Olympics was special. Those are all very special. But, for me personally, then, things that, that were totally all me, there's some races that most people don't even register when they think about me and my career, that are very special to me because of what I knew that I had to overcome to do it. 97 World Championships. I ran the 400 meters there, and I was, didn't have any tune-up races because I was injured that year, and had fluid still on my quad from an injury, and I was running funny and not, nowhere near at my best, and I just felt like I think I can win it, and I have a World Championship that I want to defend, and I'm going to go there and I'm going to win it, and through quarterfinal, a semifinal, a preliminary round, a quarterfinal round, semifinal round, got into the final and was not the favorite. And I won it. And literally 150 meters from the finish, I was winning. And then my quad that had been injured earlier, pulled on me, and I was starting to slow down thinking, okay, it's over. And then it let go. And I was like, by that time I'm in 6th place. Wow. And I started running again and I won it. So, That's all me. And that's one of the things
awesome.
I'll always be proud of. But generally speaking, the thing that I'm most proud of is everything, that I was able to, over the period of time that I was competing as a professional, I was able to win every time I went out there. That consistency and longevity, all of the things together, is what I'm most proud of.
You don't have a silver or bronze, do you?
No. It's not my area, Greg.
That's not my area. I don't like the color. It doesn't suit my look. Oh, mate.
That is the thing that I'm most proud of. I mean, I'm a believer that any medal is an amazing medal, but I am absolutely most proud of that. I was able to win gold every time. I was in a position to where I was the favorite every time. So, for me, a bronze or a silver would have been a disappointment. But, for Roger Black, who's the silver medalist from Great Britain in the 400 meters, who finished behind me in 96, nobody had Roger, and Roger's a good friend of mine. Nobody had Roger picked to get a medal.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing medal for him.
Yeah.
Nobody had him picked to get a medal. That's a gold medal for him.
It's a different kind of pressure, isn't it? It's there's different kinds of pressure everywhere in life. I know you've told this story probably a million times by now, but it was amazing for those of us that were watching it live. When you walked out onto the track in Atlanta in those golden spikes, you're going to have to just tell me a little bit of the behind the scenes story to how did those golden spikes come about? And was that an added pressure on you to live up to them? I mean, you already had the pressure on you, I guess, but tell me a bit of the behind the story scenes.
There was a World Championship race that I was in 1993. The defending Olympic champion in the 400 meters was Quincy Watts, was one of my rivals. Mm-hmm. And so it was a big showdown in the World Championships between Quincy and myself. And I won. And with about 100 meters to go in the race, Quincy just fell back dramatically. And when I crossed the finish line, and Quincy and I we weren't friends. We're friends now. We weren't friends then, but we weren't like just, bitter rivals, like some of the people I competed against. A lot of the people I competed against, we were bitter rivals. Quincy and I would actually have conversations from time to time. So I turned to him, he said, my shoe fell apart. And he was also a Nike athlete. And I was like, what? And then they was showing it on the big screen. And it was just a horrible moment for Nike. I mean, his shoe literally exploded with 100 meters to go. And the rest of the way down the home stretch, the bottom of his shoe is just flapping like a flip-flop.
Wow.
So when we're in the press conference, again, we weren't friends, but we were cordial to one another for the most part. In the press conference, there was reference to the fact that I won, and Quincy says, "Well, I think I would have won had it not been for my shoe." And I said, "Why don't you get your shoe fixed?" And I'm running the 400, and I named two races that were coming up on my schedule in the next few weeks. So that clip kind of back in the day, as much as something could go viral, went viral.
Yeah.
Well, so I won those two races, but then Nike's after suffering huge embarrassment, they came to me and they said, "Look, you've been wearing the same shoe. You don't even like our new stuff. You've been wearing the same shoe that, we discontinued a long time ago." And I had been getting them to customize an old model that I liked, that they had, that was not their most innovative and because I didn't like the new innovation they were using. Mm-hmm. And they said, what if we just make you what you want from scratch? You just tell us what you want, because we obviously got a problem with our shoes, given the Quincy situation. His shoe blew up. You're not even wearing the new shoes. So let's just start over and let's make you what you want. So that's how we started that. A couple of years before the Olympics. And we worked on it for 2 years. And we were working with companies like 3M and others, very innovative materials and things. I'm trying to make this stuff. I wanted it light, and I wanted it to work with my foot. Mm-hmm. You remember, you probably remember, you've probably seen kids who, we're going to have a race out in the schoolyard and people take their shoes off. That's because the shoes are actually not helping you.
Of course, barefoot's way quicker.
And that's how I felt, so I wanted the shoe to work with my foot than help my foot, as opposed to being an impediment. So we worked on that for 2 years. The final prototype, my shoe designer, Toby Hatfield, brought it to one of my practices, and it did everything that I wanted it to do, obviously, but now we were focused on the look. And they came up with a look that was super cool. It looked like a mirror. It wasn't the gold shoe. It was like the gold shoe, but it looked like a mirror, and I was blown away. I was like, this is going to blow people away. I was already imagining the response that the gold shoe got, but this shoe wasn't gold. And my coach was there, and he said, I don't like it. And I said, why don't you like it? And he says, it looks really cool right here, but for people watching on TV or far away in the stands, it's just going to look like a silver shoe. And as soon as he said that, I turned to Toby and immediately, just as a reaction, said, can you make this in gold? And he was shocked, and he said, let me call him. And he called 3M, and they said, we can do that in gold. And that's how it became gold.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So it wasn't some massive strategy on your part or anything else. It was just a bit of fun.
I never thought about, this is risky, or I may not win gold, and I'll be embarrassed. I never thought about that. Everything for me was all about gold.
Yeah, it was just part of it.
If I hadn't won gold, that would have been an embarrassment, but that would have paled in comparison to the disappointment I would have felt.
Yeah, it doesn't matter anyway, right? Yeah. I love that. I love that story. It's so cool. How about when you broke the world record for the 200 in 96? And because it was almost 20-year-old record, that one, right? It was a 17-year-old record when you finally broke the 200 world record in 96.
Yeah, so that record was broken in 1979, and this is 86. And I'm sorry,
96,
it was 1979. And it was broken in Mexico City at altitude.
That's right.
So that's one of the things that made it so hard to break, because it was aided by the altitude. And there was video footage that showed, Pietro Manea, who had broken, a great athlete. He was amazing, but he ran out of his lane. So he basically took a shortcut. And it wasn't called for. It wasn't
thin air, shortcut. Okay, that's
exactly. So it was a hard record to break.
Yeah.
But I actually did break it a month prior to the Atlanta Olympic Games. We had our Olympic trials at that same track, and I broke it then. But the record was 19.72. And when I broke it, the first time I barely broke it, 19.66, which is, almost a tenth. So, it was a good, record. It would have still stood for a little while, but the month later, at the games, I broke it significantly.
1932. It took Usain Bolt in 2008, 12 years later to beat that time. And then even he only went in 1930, didn't he, when he first broke it? He went in 1919, I think. But
yeah, he ran 1930, then he came back a year later in 1919. But, look, the thing about records is interesting. When that record was broken, when I broke it by so much. Oh, no one thought that it would be broken in our lifetime. Ever again.
I remember, the commentary were like, oh my God, this is...
My comment after that was, at the time I wasn't even 30 years old yet. And I was like, in my lifetime, somebody's going to break that record. That's what we do, as sprinters, we're, and now that barrier, that's the new barrier. That's what everyone's going to be gunning for. And someone will come along. So, and of course, the greatest sprinter, arguably, or maybe not arguably, ever, with Bolt, comes along, shortly, and relatively speaking, shortly afterwards, and of course broke it.
But only slightly, mate. It's broken, yes, but I tell you what, I would have loved, and this is just me sidetracking here, just you and Usain Bolt to be in the same 200 meter, both of you at your peak, because I think, that'd be a great race.
That's the thing about sports, people.
I'm just saying it'd be fun.
Seen, Michael Phelps and Mark Spitz, or Nadia Comaneci, Simone Biles.
Of course,
but we get to appreciate that Frankie Prentice was no joke. He brought the best out of me.
Yeah, Frankie
every
was
time.
awesome.
I don't think that Usain Bolt ever had, really, top level competition that pushed him. He was just so much better than everyone else. Whereas, I was able to, some of the people that I competed against in the 200 meters and the 400 meters are right there on the all-time list right along with me.
Yeah.
Whereas, you take Bolt and during his career, which in some ways is harder, to speak to his talent to run the kind of times he was without having to be pushed. I don't know that I would have run the times that I did. Well, I would have, but
we had Frankie Fredericks and Addo Bolden.
It's easier for me. It was easier for me, having guys pushing me.
Yeah. Now we've talked about some of your highs. What stands out in your career? The lessons that you've learned from some of the lows that you've had in your life. Has there been anything that sort of you step away going, "Oh, that was rough"?
I had my biggest disappointment in front of the entire world in 1992 when I was the overwhelming favorite to win the gold in the 200 meters. I was a world champion, undefeated for 2 years, and in the 200 meters, hadn't lost in my entire professional career, and got food poisoning just before the Olympics. And not only did I not win the gold that I was heavily favored for, I didn't even make it into the semifinals.
How'd you deal with that? You just acknowledge that it was food poisoning and move on, or was it like the disappointment?
You in those kind of disappointments, you have to acknowledge the disappointment, which I did. I allowed myself to be angry, sad, cry, pissed. All of those things. I allowed myself to be those things, and then at the appropriate time, I decided, okay, and now it's time to put that behind and get focused on, my next goal and, and move on. That it sounds easy sitting here saying it. It was a very difficult experience at the time, and it would be difficult for anyone. But my advice and I just happened to be fortunate enough to figure it out, and it worked out for me to figure out that, I need to allow myself to be disappointed instead of immediately trying to suppress it and move on from it as quickly as possible. My advice to anyone is, you got to allow yourself to go through that, but you just can't let it control you and swallow you up to a point where you then start to spiral. Like there was a point in that time, when I was going through that process of disappointment and sadness and anger that this happened. There was a point when I started to doubt my own talent, and if you allow yourself to stay there too long and dwell on that too long, now you're not being realistic anymore, because the reality of the situation is I am absolutely, without a doubt, the most talented sprinter on the planet, because all of the people that won the medals, the Olympic gold medalist, Mike Marsh, the silver medalist, the bronze medalist, everyone who made that final, I had raced all of those people for 2 years straight, and none of them had ever beaten me. So the reality is, when the season starts next year, I'm not going to still have food poisoning. There's going to be races, and anyone with half a brain would bet that the same result that's been happening for the same last 2 years is going to be. So why am I doubting myself? There's no reason to doubt myself. There's a reason to be upset and disappointed. There's a reason to be sad about what happened, but there's no reason to believe that I'm not going to win when we start this season next year.
That's well said. That's very cool. Well, mate, retiring from your professional career, was that an easy decision for you? Did you always know that, 2001 was going to be your last year of racing? Any regrets?
No, and I know, that, so I knew when I wanted to retire. When I retired in 2001 after Sydney in 2000, I knew after 96 that, as long as I get this world record sometime between now and Sydney in 2000, then 2000 will be my last Olympics, and I'll retire. I'll have one more professional season, then I'll shut it down. And all of that happened exactly the way I wanted it to. And so when I retired, I was still ranked number one in the world, could have kept going, but I was ready to move on to the next phase of my life. I knew that I was always motivated by my goals, and I didn't have any more goals. I was very fortunate to have accomplished all of them. And that's so I don't have any regrets. And I know that I'm very fortunate in that sense, because a lot of athletes do have regrets, and it's because they weren't as lucky as, that's just sheer luck that I was able to, not have any career-ending injuries or things like that, that's not sheer luck, but there's a great deal of luck that comes into play, and, being able to stay healthy and all of those things and end on your own terms. Most athletes don't get to end on their own terms, and that's when there are regrets, and that's when you get people saying, "I'm gonna make a comeback,"
no,
because they're thinking about the good days.
Yeah. So, no, I hear you, and I would say with the luck, and you've probably heard this expression. It really is where preparation meets opportunity, and I feel like when you've had a good career like yours, you've prepared, you've done all the things that you didn't like to do, whether that be the stretching and the lifting and everything else around outside just the running. It's amazing, and then you've put yourself in the right place at the right time. It's preparation meets opportunity. Suddenly you're very lucky, and you certainly gave us all a tremendous amount of joy over those years. That 10 years of running. You're doing outstanding work with BBC on the commentary at the Olympics. You're one of my all-time faves to have the insights. And you've also got your Michael Johnson performance. You mentioned earlier in the show that you work with a lot of athletes from various sports and helping them. Where's that based out of?
So we're all digital now, and we no longer actually train athletes. We did for 15 years. Now we provide coach education, primarily coach education support. We've always worked with a lot of sports teams, Premier League, soccer clubs, Olympic federations around the world. So we provide most of our support to all of those kind of clubs and organizations now. So we're largely B2B now, and we're all of that stuff's digital, so which makes it a lot easier for us.
Awesome.
Yeah, still able to help people. We're helping the coaches help their athletes be better, and
that's awesome.
It's a lot of fun.
Good work, mate. Well, can I finish off with some rapid fire questions with you? Some of them are serious, some of them are fun. You ready?
All right.
See if you can find your fast twitch fibers. Okay, greatest sprinter of all time.
Jesse Owens.
I love it. What about a female?
Greatest sprinter of all time. I mean, it's got to be Florence Greco-Joyner.
Florence, yeah. I was going to say Kathy Freeman, but okay.
You're talking favorite.
I did. I guess I did talk favorite. That's okay.
Those are always two.
Yeah, that's true. All right, here's one for you. Greatest athlete of all time in any sport.
Jesse
Owens still. All right, I like it.
Yeah.
All right, mate. First job.
Worst job you could possibly have, working at Toys R Us during Christmas.
Really? I love it.
Serious.
See, this is how you get to know somebody. Toys R Us at Christmas.
In high school. That's the worst job. I mean, literally, I was working, my job was stock. I was working in stocking where you got to put, take the stuff out of the warehouse, put it on the shelf. Fast as I put it on the shelf, the kids just pull it off the shelf.
I love it.
Seriously. And Toys R Us closes at midnight during Christmas.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah.
Which decade of music is best?
I get killed for this, but 90s. 90s or 60s.
Wow.
90s or 60s. I listen to a lot of 60s R&B and soul.
Yeah.
But 90s hip-hop and R&B, you can't. You got to have a hard time beating that.
Well, mate, on that, I think this is a good place to wrap it up. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed just this conversation and you spending the time with me. It really has been a bit of a highlight for me. As you can tell, I'm probably a bit of a fan of track and field and your career. What's next for you anyway, mate? I saw in one of your answers on any question you had a 2028 Olympic jacket on with LA Olympics. Are you involved in that?
Yeah, I've been involved from the very beginning with when we were bidding, and now I'm part of the organizing committee and on the executive committee, and we got a great staff over there, and looking forward to, in 6 years' time now, 5 years' time, actually, so it's coming. Yeah, super excited. But I'm just, at this point, I'm focused a lot on my corporate speaking, coaching, working with a lot of different Fortune 500 companies and tech startups, helping them understand how to overcome challenges and do great things.
Awesome, buddy. Yeah, fantastic. And anybody listening, you want MJ to come and speak, I'll put all the details in the show notes and everything else. But Mate, thoroughly enjoyed this and truly appreciate you for sharing your journey and just all your knowledge, mate, and all your stories. It's been fantastic.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. You can find all the show notes and timestamps and everything else at bennettendurance.com/media.
Thanks a lot for listening. If you enjoyed the show, your support would truly be appreciated. You can visit the Patreon page, or you can subscribe with your podcast app of choice. Don't miss the next episode, so subscribe and be notified. For show notes, if you want to know more, please visit bennettendurance.com. I'm Phil Liggett, and on behalf of Greg Bennett, here's to the next time, and I hope you will join Greg again very soon.